Hello and welcome to the webinar. We are ready to begin our program, so let's get started. I would like to introduce your host and presenter for today's event, Dave Kyle.
Good afternoon and welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us today. Our screen should change over and you should hear some information, or see some information regarding how to dial in if you aren't hearing the audio right now. We'll be running our webinar today till about 1 p.m. Get you back to work after lunch here. And again, thank you for joining us. There's a area in your control panel that allows you to ask questions. And anytime during the webinar, please feel free to ask a question there. If we can't get to it right away, we will take some time to field some questions at the end as well. So look forward to having you with us today. And again, my name is Dave Kyle. I'm with Ease Technologies, and thank you for joining us. I feel very happy to have Matt Anderson with me today from McFarlin. And Matt, welcome. Introduce yourself.
Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us, Dave. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Matt Anderson. I'm a partner with the McFarlin Insurance Agency. We're an independent insurance and risk advisory firm located in Columbia, Maryland. Work with a number of businesses and individuals to help them get back on their feet if something bad happens to them.
Great. Yeah, Matt and I did a presentation together last year on a similar topic, and I asked Matt to join me again today to kind of look and explore some more of the risk aspects of some of this and some of the products available from an insurance standpoint, and not just the technical story that I have to share. So in our agenda today, we'll be covering a few different things. I'll be sharing some ideas about some of the threat examples, what specifically is social engineering, how phishing attacks are targeting organizations. Matt's going to then help me talk about managing an attack or a breach and sharing some ideas on the economic impacts of a cyber attack, and then, of course, ways to mitigate your risk. And it covers some Q&A at the end. So let's get started. One of the things we hear a lot about in the news, and I talk a lot about, is the Fortune 100 accounts, and I write some blog posts about this, and you see this pretty regularly in the newspapers, where everything from Target to Home Depot to Microsoft and more recently MedStar Health are all organizations that have been targeted. Most of these situations are not the small and medium-sized businesses that you hear about too often, and most of these cyber attacks are specific things that go after personal information or point-of-sale systems. And so I help differentiate some of that. What I want to talk today, and Matt is going to help me with, is some of the accounts like this you see on your screen right now. And these accounts are really accounts you may not recognize. They're smaller organizations, they're escrow accounts, they're police. There is a company here that provides electricity management. There's a security company. So these are the small businesses, the medium-sized organizations that I want to talk about what's happening and what compromises are taking place with them right now, and get into some more detail on that. So the one question that often comes up when I'm talking about this particular topic is really what is going on and what do people want when they're having these security violations and hacks. The biggest thing that's happening, what they want to go after for the most part, is really some way to get some money. And a couple different ways that happens, and I'll share with some of the different things that are going on. So money is the most important thing. Second thing is personal information, and
Which they can use to sell and get more money.
Exactly, Matt. So look at some of the bigger ones on the first screen I brought up, and Home Depot, Target. Those are all personal identification or credit card information ones.
Right.
There was a big hack with the Office of Personnel Management. Did you remember hearing about that one?
Yep.
Okay, that was last April. And
so basically, anyone who worked for the government, your personal information is floating around out there.
And that one was not that was deemed kind of more of a nation state attack. So personal information was taken, and that was probably done by name your foreign national government that was after us at that point. Another type of attack that happens is what I call a bigger fish, meaning that an example of the Home Depot compromise that happened a couple of years ago, they got to Home Depot through the contractors. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the compromise happened, Matt, at a smaller vendor. The vendor, because they had a relationship with Home Depot, was then the way they got into the larger fish.
And I believe Target was similar with that.
And so is the OPM hack as well. They had vendors they targeted first and then got to the larger fish. Right. So sometimes you may not have specific items that a cyber thief may want, they're looking to you to get to somewhere else. Probably the fourth thing that's out there is intellectual property that they're going to be going after. And again, depending on the type of organization you are, where you're at, who you work with, it really determines what kind of attack you're going to see and what you're going to run into. So let's just review some of those again. Personal information is kind of like when Maryland University got hacked. There was about a couple 100,000 accounts that were compromised there. That included social security numbers, names and address, and things like that.
Correct.
MedStar one. So, Matt, have you heard about this?
I have. I was on the front page of the Baltimore Sun, I believe, 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago.
Yeah. It's pretty big news. So this is actually multiple healthcare accounts were compromised. The other one that is a big one is called wire transfer heists, and they aren't on the paper as much. And then finally, intellectual property. And intellectual property ones are a larger organization where, in the case of Alcoa, when they got compromised, there was a technical process they were using to make steel. And a nation state went after their intellectual property of how they created and manufactured steel, and they were compromised.
So trade secrets and things like that.
Exactly. And the same thing with Epic Games. Somebody compromised them and took their intellectual property about certain games code and things like that. So we want to just talk about, and what we're going to focus mostly on, is this ransomware situation and the wire transfer heists that are going on. So one of the things that we often deal with from a technical standpoint is making sure everyone has the right technology in place. And I'll have to say that most organizations really have a lot of this good security in place already. So things like firewalls, antivirus protection, spam filters, and patch management. If you can imagine, a lot of these organizations spend millions of dollars on this, and yet there's still a lot of these compromises that are going on. Matt, are you having any conversations with your accounts on their security infrastructures?
Absolutely. It's almost becoming a standard underwriting question now during the insurance application process. Before it was, do you have a sprinkler building? Do you have an alarm system? Right. What breed is your dog for your homeowner's policy? Well, now we're starting to field more and more questions as far as what sort of controls are in place for the computer systems for this particular submission or this particular account. Are they backing everything up? Do they have an antivirus software that they're updating on a regular basis? Things like that. So it's becoming more and more of a common request, at least in my world,
right,
for making sure that accounts are doing what they can to protect their information and their systems.
And in our side of what we deal with, from an information technology side, sometimes to the point where I'm sure our accounts think we're kind of annoying, that we want to make sure we have the right firewalls and software in place and patch management and all this process to help mitigate issues that are out there. But even with all this investment and time, we still have compromises. And in the case of MedStar Health just recently, know that they have invested millions and millions of dollars with the right people, the right technologies, and still they got severely compromised. So I want to explain kind of what happens with some of that. And the bigger compromise that's going on right now is not through technology, but through people. And the term that we look at and talk about, Matt, is called social engineering from our side. And it's something that's becoming more and more prevalent, and everyone's more aware of what it is. So basically, social engineering is the psychological manipulation of people into performing actions or divulging confidential information. And I think I go back to some of the old movies that are around out there, and Ocean's 11 isn't that old, but that was basically a con game that was portrayed by people like Brad Pitt and Andy Garcia and Matt Damon and George Clooney, and they conned somebody out of a lot of money. And even an older movie was The Sting, which again, a bunch of con men, 1930s, Robert Redford, Paul Newman. They used a little technology, but not like the technology today. Today, the technology and the mechanisms for this are a little more sophisticated. The con is still there, and the only difference is they're using emails, thumb drives, social media, phone calls, and dumpster dives to make compromises happen. Matt, you familiar with what a dumpster dive is?
People are actually diving into my trash can to get my information. Yep.
It doesn't happen too often, but it's part of a process. I know a lot of the folks in the legal profession and the accounting profession are very aware and sensitive to shredding information. Mm-hmm. That's why that conversation always takes place about making sure confidential information is shredded. But it has been known that certain businesses have been compromised, and it points back to not necessarily always one thing, but a couple of things. And one of the areas that they're going to look for is confidential information they can find in a trash can. So a lot of the it's showed attacks that are happening from the movies, and making that point of something like The Sting, the movie there. But today, compromises are happening much more remotely in a combination of different mechanisms. And I want to share one of those examples that happens. Unfortunately, we make it all just a little too easy for them.
Starbucks. Hi, this is John from the corporate office with Starbucks.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, pretty good. I was just calling. We were having problems with people calling in and pretending they're the corporate office, and we just wanted to let you know that if anyone calls in and says they're with the corporate office, just not to give them any information and not to believe them.
Okay.
Because apparently people have been calling in and just making prank calls, I assume.
Okay, great.
Okay, and who's this?
Okay, thanks for letting us know.
Sure. Who's this I'm speaking with? So your last name?
Don, REMONT.
Okay, and what's your employee number, or I guess we could look it up by your cell phone number, whatever phone number's on file with us.
Wait, you just want my partner numbers?
Sure.
1-3.
Okay, but do you have a phone number? Because that's the easiest way to look up your file here.
68.
And do you remember that part where I said not to give out personal information to anyone pretending to be the corporate office?
Yes.
Why'd you just give me all that?
I don't know.
I'm a prank caller.
Because
Unfortunately, that example was all too true. And some of the threats that we have out there, I did bring up the idea that phones are part of how the scams are going on, and I'll give you some examples. But this example is just that, where people are probably wanting to be helpful,
Right.
Right. But that helpfulness is
That's
working
just human
against them.
nature. We just want to help people. And
Yeah, and it's a good thing, but in this case, it's too helpful.
They're exploiting that.
Right.
Absolutely.
What I want to do is share some examples, and again, I know we have a lot of folks on here that are trying to understand how does this happen. Again, made a lot of investments in technology. I'm using really smart people to help me out. How is this going on? So I want to share the biggest problem we have out right now with all this is not just phone calls, but it also comes from emails, and we call these phishing attacks. So I want to give you an example of some of these phishing attack emails that you might see out there, and what are the problems. Again, over 90% of all fraud that's happening and compromises originate from these emails. So here's an email that I got, and again, for the most part, you look at it for a little bit and you start realizing it has some flaws to it and some reason to take concern. So first off, for me, I'm looking at it, I see who's this coming from? It's an AT&T voicemail. Flag for me is I don't have AT&T, so that's one instance that I'd be concerned about. Who's it going to? Why would an email for a voicemail go to 5 people? Another one here, I know there's an attachment. Big concern when you ever see an attachment in any kind of email that you have coming in, especially from someone you don't recognize. Then you start looking at the details of this. This particular email was sent to me last year or two, and the date on it was a couple years old. So it was just really didn't really make sense. Information on there was saying, "Hey, contact us," but there was missing information. So all in all, this looks like it was copied and spoofed and emailed back out as part of a compromise for an email phishing attack. Another one, and this one I like. Probably it's my favorite one of all examples. Again, there's some things in here that were pretty smart and very cleverly done here. One was the address was good, so the person's name on there was someone that worked in our company. So I recognize as being, hey, that could be legit. There was an attachment, again, having my attention, but the rest of the contents of the email have a really interesting sense of urgency. So Matt, when I'm looking at this,
Right.
What it says is, hey, look, and it came in at 5 o'clock at the end of the day. So the person receiving this, which they're hoping to target a finance department, it says, hey, before 10 o'clock tomorrow, the next day, we need you to do some action right away on these funds. So someone who's working in the finance department sees this email, comes in at 5 o'clock, and all they have to do is click on that attachment and the compromise is started.
And it's interesting too. I mean, I know the EFT amount that they're looking for in there is $6,200. Okay, well that's a good bit of money, but it's not an exorbitant bit of money. You know, they're not asking for $250,000 or $500,000. No, just $6,200
Right.
regarding this. Oh, sure, yeah. So
They'll just check it out.
right.
Another type of compromise is one that can happen in an email. This was another email that was had a link to a server, and this server, you'd click on it, and the malware would be installed on your computer, not by a file, but injected from a server that you clicked on the link. And again, some information in here that led me to look at this email a little more closely. That led me to believe it would be an improper and dangerous email as well. So this is the biggest problem out there for employees and your employees that you need to be aware of, is that they get these emails no matter how good your filters are, your spam protection, your virus protection, things that you have in place. These emails are coming in.
It's no longer the Nigerian prince who wants to gift you $7 million if you can, send over $5,000 to him. I know at least 2 or 3 times a week I get emails, Dave, from American Express saying there's been a hold put on my account. Well, I would hope so. I don't have an American Express card. Navy Federal Credit Union has now, quote unquote, started sending me stuff regarding my mortgage. Well, I don't have a Navy Federal Credit Union account. But these are just becoming more and more common, and the design of these messages are becoming more and more slick.
Right. And they're just trying to get to those people that maybe do have Navy Federal Credit Union, thinking that they're going to look at it and click on it. So
what's going on with my account? Yeah, let me take a look. Yep.
So let's get into specifics of ransomware and how that works and what's going on, because that's the one we've heard most recently about that really hit so many hospitals. But it's not just hospitals. It's really all kind of forms of businesses that are out there. And it's really a big concern for us supporting organizations because, as we described, you can have all the best technology in place and still have some of these compromises happen. So these email phishing attacks are what is the start of some of this. What ends up happening is a specific name was what's called crypto locker, and there's actually about 20 different versions of this. There's a whole story and a whole movie could be written about the guys who originally wrote this malware. I think the team is now in jail, but before they were picked up, they took the code that they'd written and they sold it out in the black market for other people to start using and making compromises. So that's why there's 20 different versions. There's crypto locker, there's crypto wall, there's a whole bunch of them. The biggest thing about this ransomware and what happens and how it works, once the compromise starts and you click on something like that zip file that I showed as an example, it lays in wait oftentimes 2 or 3 days. And once it's there, it may do other things depending on how it's set up to do. It may cover its trail a little bit, which is why it can't be found by virus protection. But once it starts, it actually encrypts your hard drive. And I'll show you a screen that you get in here in just a moment. But the number of people that have hit by this in the last 2 years, it's been around for about 1.5 years, 2 years now. About 400,000 people in the United States have been hit. FBI is saying do not pay. We'll talk about that in a second. But the biggest thing about this is having a really good disaster recovery plan from a technical standpoint. And this is a screen that I'm sharing with you now that is seen by the original Crypto Locker one. There's a newer screen that comes out depending on who's made the software for you. So Matt, have you seen or heard about any examples of this and what you're running into?
I had a meeting with a client 3 weeks ago talking about their insurances and their exposures to loss and what sort of protection was available for them. And I had mentioned getting some sort of cyber or data breach policy in place. They said, "Oh, we're a manufacturer's rep. We're dealing with contractors and pipe manufacturers. This is really not something that's going to to impact us, and we don't think it's necessary." So, okay, that's fine. I left the application on their desk, and then a week later received a phone call from their chief operating officer who had been hit with a ransomware attack. And he said, you told us. We didn't think it would happen to us, but sure enough, here we are. And their concern was they have a lot of confidential information regarding their manufacturers, a lot of trade secrets that they need protected. So in addition to the ransomware, they're worried about what impact this might have on their vendors.
Right. Let me step you through a little bit of a visual how this happens. So essentially, hackers create code with a malware or a virus on it, and then send these emails out through phishing. And again, phishing is just the indiscriminate emails being sent out to millions of people at one time, hoping that some poor sucker is going to click on the email. Once that email is selected, especially the attachment on there, which contains the virus itself, that's when the compromise happens. Ransomware gets installed, and in this case, the screen comes up. What they've been doing recently is in that screen, they'll ask you to pay the ransom, which is through Bitcoin, which is an online service to kind of like PayPal, but it allows people to send money anonymously. It depends on the malware, but some organizations are asking $300. Some people are asking $750.
And let's say we pay that money.
Right.
I don't want the headache. It's $350. Fine. Here's a check, or
Right.
here's $350 worth of Bitcoins. Am I out of the woods?
Technically, you may not be, and that's where the FBI has been, kind of touting, and they just did it today. Do not pay, because there's no guarantee that these untrustworthy people are going to, unencrypt your hard drive.
How unethical of them, though.
Yeah, kind of shocking.
I know, right?
So the thing, and I don't get too technical, but the only way from a technical standpoint to recover this is we have to go back to a could be 3-5 day old backup of someone's computer at this point to recover that information. And it's really the only way around it. We have been in the past able to recover certain files. The problem with recovering files from this is that oftentimes those malware attachments are hiding somewhere within all this, and it can't be seen. So the only way to truly recover is to go back in time 3, 4, or 5 days and just start over again from that point before the compromise happens.
So depending on the type of business, that could be a big inconvenience.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So let's talk about a couple more before we get into some of the things Matt's going to share with us on some of the risk plans and insurance plans that we talk about here. Two other important ones that I'm bringing up for you right now is one's a wire transfer and a technique called the CEO fraud. And this one's been around, again, for about 2-3 years, and the FBI is reporting that about $750 million between the last 2 years have been taken from U.S. businesses as a result of this. So almost every week, there's millions and millions of dollars of fraud happening through wire transfers. Basically, what ends up happening here is it's an executive impersonation. And it's done by targeting the finance department. And what they end up doing is they use it in a combination with a phishing attack. Oftentimes, they'll use a spear phishing, which is actually a targeted email. Regular phishing is just indiscriminate emails going out.
You're throwing out a net.
Yeah, so spear phishing, you're familiar with that one?
Yep. You're targeting one particular individual that you think can get you either to the CEO or is the CEO. And
it's happening pretty regularly. I know of a few accounts that are doing this or have this happen. And then in combination, after the email goes out, a phone call may happen. So it kind of runs like this. Email gets sent. It's spoofed. It may not even be from, obviously from that person. It may seem like it's coming from John Smith, the CEO, and it's sent to Steve in the finance department. But after the email is sent, the phone call happens. And the phone call happens that Steve Smith is calling up and saying, "Hi, I'm the CEO. I just sent you an email. You should see it. I'd like to get a wire transfer going for $40,000 to this bank in the Bahamas."
And it's 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon.
We need to get this done right away.
Right.
And so a huge sense of urgency, and it happens pretty regularly, more often than not. There's been reports of some organizations that have lost millions and millions of dollars because of this kind of fraud that's going on out there. Mostly because there's not a lot of good checks and balances of how the system's being done. Now, it doesn't happen repeatedly in this manner, but this is the most typical one that ends up happening. I'll give you one more example of not necessarily CEO fraud, but this one's very similar in nature. The only difference for this is there's no phone calls involved. This actually happened to a hospital out in Washington about 1.5 years ago. And again, common situation, not a lot of phone calls, not a CEO fraud situation, but a little more technology involved. So what the hackers end up doing, they write some code, and in this case, it was really pretty clever. They ended up hiring about 100 home workers in California, and in part of the relationship, they established the ability to transfer money back and forth between the hackers and the home workers who thought they were working from home, thought they were going to get paid,
right,
needed to have some banking information set up. Once that was done, the hackers targeted through any number of means, a couple different organizations. In this case, they got into the hospital through some malware. And the type of malware they installed here was called a keylogger. Not to get technical, but what it does, it just records every keystroke that happens. So when the finance department in the hospital was going to the bank, they knew all the names and passwords necessary to log into that hospital. Once they did that, they started transferring small amounts of money to test it all out. So they transfer about $50, see that the $50 were working out well. After that happened, they went for the big hit, and they got about $1.2 million out of this hospital over a period of a weekend.
So this is a long con. I mean, this isn't something that you just click on an email and all of a sudden, okay, boom, your system is shut down. This is something that probably took these guys weeks, if not months,
exactly
to set up.
And if you think about it, how sophisticated, it's almost like these movies that we've seen and we recognize. Like,
Right.
Ocean's 11. These are multiple people, multiple ways, avenues. They're very patient. They go after it in such a way that, they're not going to. It isn't just one click and you lose $1 million.
Right, they're not robbing a gas station here.
Mm-hmm. So let's move over a little bit to some of the things that you can help us out with.
Sure.
I mean, again, we wanted to share some of these ideas with our accounts, and some of the people we're talking with about, what are your exposures to some of this loss, and what are the ways we can be, help prevent and work towards some of this?
Absolutely, and the main exposures that any business owner, any individual for that matter, you're looking at first-party losses and third-party losses. First-party is how is it going to impact you directly, impact your business, impact your employees, and then third-party is your clients, your vendors, any outside organizations that you may deal with. So you've got a concern that there's a financial loss to the business, you're going to lose money, a financial loss incurred by your customers if let's say one of your employees sends out an email that infects one of your biggest customers, and all of a sudden that customer is shut down, and they figure out that it was because of one of your employees forwarded something over that they shouldn't have. You've got employee data on file, names, social security numbers, addresses, healthcare information. A lot of times if you're providing employee benefits, 401k information, so all that data is flowing through the business. And in addition to your employees, like I said, first party, now you've got the third party, the customer data, names, federal tax identification numbers, credit card numbers for payments, medical or financial information from those customers. And a lot of folks say, oh, well, for my credit card processing, I use a third party for that, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'll just, PayPal will take care of me, or what's it with the Square that everybody uses?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, they're going to take care of me. Well, maybe not. That information is still passing through your hands, through your business, through your employees' hands. And if it's determined that it's your fault that the information got out there, you're going to be the one to have to make right with that. Trade secrets, copyrights, published documents. Again, just more information that could get out there. This is a big one that people don't think about oftentimes. Business interruption, loss of revenue from a computer shutdown or slowdown. Think about it if you're at home and you're trying to watch Netflix and your home Wi-Fi goes out, and how that drives you nuts and how frustrating that is. Now imagine you're at work and you can't get online. You can't get on the computer. Most businesses nowadays, that would bring everything to a halt. Most point of sale systems are set up through the computer. Most phone systems now run through the computer. And if all that stuff goes offline, you're going to be back in the dark ages. It's going to be very frustrating. Credit monitoring. Again, if it's deemed that your business was responsible for some sort of breach and someone else's information getting out there, you're going to have to provide credit monitoring services to them. I believe it's for up to a year in the state of Maryland, but each state is different. So Maryland's different than Virginia, then it's different than Pennsylvania, then it's different than Delaware. And then the last one that people tend to overlook a little bit as well is going to be...
Sorry.
I'm good.
Slow on the button there.
Crisis management and public relations expenses. This is a goodwill concern that a lot of businesses have. Oh, I don't want to deal with Matt's bank anymore because he lost all of my money and now all of my information is out there, and subsequently I had to get new credit cards and get a new social security number. So this is a huge exposure for businesses with the loss of a customer base just because customers don't trust them anymore. Employees don't trust them anymore. So a couple quick facts for everybody on this afternoon. Top 3 data breach causes are typically malicious criminal attack, human error, and then system glitches for this.
What's a system glitch?
System glitch, a hiccup, something goes down,
Right.
computer crashes.
Or maybe a firewall that stops working in some way.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. They're able to sneak in through the back door.
Yeah, we've been, again, working a lot on educational aspects of the human error, which we see a lot of. But we also get back to the malicious aspect of these criminal attacks. They can be relentless sometimes. They can start and just keep going.
60% of all targeted cyber attacks strike small and medium-sized businesses. Again, it's not just the Targets and the Home Depots of the world. They're going to go for the low-hanging fruit. Sure, with a MedStar, that's a multi-million-dollar hospital system, and you might be able to get some more out of them. But if it's easier to go to Bob's Electrical Services and stick Bob for 15 grand and then get out of there knowing that he doesn't really have the defenses in place that a MedStar or a Target or a Home Depot might have, they're going to go for the lower hanging fruit.
Yep.
The average cost per record breached in a cyber attack is around $217. That includes notification expenses, credit monitoring expenses, that goodwill restoration that I had mentioned, having to bring in a public relations company to set up a 1-800 number for your boo-boo. And then another interesting fact, in 60% of cases, attackers were able to compromise an organization within minutes. And Dave's going to touch on this a little bit later, but your password should not be password. It should not be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, there's a lot to all this, and I'll share a few tips on passwords for us when we wrap up here today. But again, I talk about it as and write blog posts on it and have conversations with people. But that complex password that everybody should have is the most important thing you can have in place to help keep yourself protected personally. You can take on for yourself. So we'll get to that as well. So yeah, Matt, starting off now is what products are available to help keep someone protected?
Right, and the quick answer is there's a lot of products and more coming on the market every day. Right now, there's over 70 insurance carriers that are offering a wide range of cyber liability and data breach coverages. This was not the case 10 years ago. There were maybe 10 or 15 carriers and more your Lloyd's of London type insurance carriers and companies that were offering this. Now, as these breaches are becoming more prevalent, the insurance carriers are trying to respond to this new exposure to loss. So you're seeing a lot more Main Street insurance companies, Hartford, Travelers, Liberty Mutual, coming to market with some product to try to solve a cyber attack, a data breach. The question I am most frequently asked is, how much does this cost? And the answer I unfortunately always have to say to clients or prospective clients is it really depends on the size and scope of your business and your exposures. If you're a doctor's office, Dave, and you've got 2 or 3 office locations and you work with thousands of customers and you have all of their medical records, well, that's going to be a lot higher than a t-shirt kiosk in the mall with 2 part-time employees. So it's really all relevant based on the information that's passing through the business.
I think also, too, and you'll be explaining this a bit more, and I enjoyed this in our conversation last time, was just the different types of not only business, but just the different types of recovery you need, where you need to invest in, and which you'll be covering here for us, too. So the big one, though, is what's your business first? What kind of things do you protect?
And as a business owner, that's what you need to ask yourself. If something goes wrong, if this information gets out there, what is the impact going to be to my business? How is this going to cause me some sort of financial loss? Main product we see is this data privacy liability, protecting against claims alleging that your negligence, so your company, your employees caused some sort of breach or violation of a data privacy law and the improper dissemination of non-public personal information. So info got out there that should not have, and now you need to fix it. Now you need to make it right. So that's the data privacy liability.
Okay.
Network security liability. It's kind of similar, alleging your negligence resulted in failure to prevent unauthorized access or unauthorized use of the third party's computer system. The inability of an unauthorized third party to gain access to your services, transmission of malicious code, failure to prevent identity theft, or failure to prevent a denial of service to an authorized third party. So you shut them down.
Right.
You shut them down. E-media liability, and this is an interesting one, protecting against negligence resulting in wrongful publication, defamation, libel, or slander, harming the reputation or character of maybe one of your competitors.
What would be an example of something like this?
If we're going back 15 years ago, it would have been Coke, taking out a big, newspaper ad saying Pepsi uses child labor.
Right.
And Pepsi suing Coke and saying, no, we don't.
Right.
You're wrong. You're doing this to damage us. Well, now it could be one of your employees just lost a big deal to a competitor, and they decide to log on the company Facebook page and go onto a big rant about this.
Right.
And say, oh, this company used poor practices, and they're sketchy, and they're bad people to work with, and here's why. That didn't exist.
Right.
That, the social media has kind of kicked the door open for all sorts of defamation exposures now, because more people have access to it, and it's real easy for somebody to go on a rant on a blog post these days. So that's where the e-media liability could come in. Also, if you're publishing information on your website, and let's say Ease, for example, Dave, you published an article and you copied it verbatim from a Microsoft blog, and you gave them no credit.
Sure.
And they come back and say, well, wait a minute, what the heck? You're using our information, it's clearly our information, on your website without giving us any sort of credit.
Got it.
That's not cool. So that's how that e-media liability kind of comes into play there. Notification expense and credit monitoring expenses. I touched on this earlier. If you are deemed to be responsible for a breach of someone's personally identifiable information, it is your responsibility to provide that impacted party with credit monitoring expenses, typically for up to a year, to make sure that the people who were impacted by that loss, that someone hasn't stolen their identity, that no one's out opening up new credit cards or getting new cell phones. Or I saw one instance where somebody was a victim of identity theft and had a Comcast cable account that they never knew was under their name. And someone was able to get away with having free cable on this impacted person for up to 6 months. So
this is the kind of service that would be really good for someone who did hold a lot of credit cards. They have a business or held a lot of personal information about of anybody of any type.
Correct.
Whether you have a lot of employees, whether you have a lot of customers, or customers like retail, online business, things like that.
Absolutely.
Again, not for everybody.
No.
Again, managing which one of these products is really the best fit for what your business is about. But if somebody has a lot of names, a lot of information, and you're trying to keep it protected, and it gets out, just be a way to help get some coverage for yourself.
And again, each state has different rules and regulations as far as what you need to notify and what you need to do to help make these impacted individuals whole again. As a business owner, do you want the insurance company to come in and tell you, okay, Pennsylvania's rules are this, we got you covered here. Maryland is this, we got you covered here. Or do you want to try to navigate those waters on your own when you could have, for pennies on the dollars, just handed it off to somebody that knew what they were doing and taken care of it for you?
And that's the kind of thing that happens here is in this kind of product the insurance would actually pay for someone to manage the whole process for you.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Speaking of management, here's one about crisis management.
Yep. So this would be bringing in that public relations firm or even a law firm if need be to mitigate any additional harm. I think MedStar did a really great job with this. They owned up to what had happened. They got out in front of it. Their website, one of the first things you saw was, hey, here's a big press release saying we're on top of it, but if you feel you might be impacted, you can call this 1-800 number that we've got set up. Again, this is just a way of bringing in the experts to handle this for you so you don't have to navigate these murky waters on your own.
There's a lot to this when a breach of some type does happen. We talked a little about the cyber heist where, financially a company's impacted. Matt's sharing products and services available if there's a data compromise.
Mm-hmm.
And last year we did a seminar together, and in those discussions we had someone in public relations as well as a law firm there with us who talked about the legal obligations of when things need to take place, but also the exposure issues from a public relations standpoint of how do you make that work. And again, to your point about how MedStar Health did, I watched it pretty closely because the last 2 years with the number of breaches that have been going on, you see who's done a good job and who hasn't. And MedStar really worked hard at keeping daily updates going on, telling what they could share. A lot of times people don't really know what's going on yet. It takes several days to uncover how far and to what extent the problems really lie. But they did a very good job of making sure they were pretty clear and communicative to everybody involved and the media as to what the issue is, which is really important.
Absolutely. Data privacy and regulatory expenses. In the event that you are fined by the FCC or the Attorney General, let's say the breach was caused just due to egregious error on your part, and you're fined subsequently because of that, because you weren't using what would be deemed, a prudent person best judgment to try to protect this information, and then there's fines and penalties that the businesses sit with. There are insurance products out there to help cover you for that.
Great.
Cyber investigation expense. Again, this is something that probably won't be for everybody, but if you do have a lot of information stored at your business, this is the insurance carrier covering expenses incurred by a third-party vendor to investigate and determine the source or cause of the wrongful act, of the breach. And this could take, as we just mentioned with MedStar, it could take months.
Right.
You're going to need to bring in attorneys. You're going to need to bring in cyber experts to start unraveling the weave of what happened.
And this is an area you don't hear a lot about. And again, we're talking about one area of exposure and compromises that go on. But a lot of when there's an intellectual property compromise that happens, that's when someone should be considering, or what kind of, what are you trying to protect?
Right.
And I know there's a lot of cyber forensics that happens, and there's a lot of experts that are brought in to uncover and understand whether it may be an internal situation, an external situation, that where the compromise did take place as it relates to intellectual property, and folks like that are brought in to investigate the situation.
Yep, absolutely. And then last but certainly not least, cyber extortion, coverage for ransomware, being held hostage from malicious software. And there's some overlap here because historically you could purchase a crime policy if somebody walked into your business, put a gun in your face, and demanded all the cash that you had on the premises, or somebody broke in after hours and took the safe with them. Now a lot of crime policies are extending coverage to include cyber theft and fraud and wire transfer fraud. So you got to really look at your policy carefully. Some policies even include a little bit of this cyber liability coverage, or maybe a little bit of cyber crime coverage. Most smaller white-collar businesses are written on what's called a BOP policy, a business owner's policy, and it's like a homeowner's policy for your business. It'll give you property and general liability. But now some carriers will throw in, for just a little taste, not enough to get you drunk, but just enough to get you feeling okay. They'll give you a little bit of cyber liability. They'll give you a little bit of crime coverage, maybe a little bit of employment practices liability. If you're a law firm and you've got hundreds and hundreds of clients all over the East Coast, is that $10,000 limit going to be enough? Absolutely not. But if you're, a 1 or 2 person accounting firm working out of your basement and you've got a little bit of coverage on there, maybe that is enough to cover what you need.
Good.
So, yep.
Well, thanks for covering those with us, Matt. That was, again, it's one of the things that you don't hear a lot about, but there, like you said, over the last 10 years, been an increasing number of offerings that are available, and encourage everyone to speak with Matt, speak with other agents that might help provide some good counsel on which products and services that you want to match up to what your business can be.
Yeah, talk to your agent. Make sure they're working with you to identify your exposures to loss. And another thing, because the product offering has expanded so much in recent years, the pricing has subsequently gone down. It's supply and demand.
Right.
So as more of these products become available, the prices drop down.
And again, products that weren't available a number of years ago. And so as your business relates, it'd be good to talk to your agent about what it is you're doing, what do you have, and what offerings they have to help keep you protected in some of that. Great.
There you go.
Well, let's talk about some tips we have. Matt and I we had a couple different slides. We condensed it into one here about some steps. We originally had 7, I think, in one spot, and we're sharing some things together here. So let's talk about a few of these to help you as a business and as an executive, reduce some of these risks. So the first one we talk about, and we share this one together, is provide employee education programs. And from my standpoint at our company, and I know we have several clients with us today, and thank you for being with us, is talk to Chris, talk to your account manager, talk to me. We'd be happy to come out, and we've done this with other organizations, to educate your employees. And we can do a private webinar on just what you need to know and what your employees need to know about this kind of topic. It could be a half-hour lunch and learn kind of thing. But whatever you do, take some time to make sure your employees are aware of what these issues are and reduce the risk.
Do you recommend people have a written policy in place for this? And I know it varies for
it does.
Size business.
There's a couple different aspects. We often recommend and we share and help support different types of policies, but this is certainly one of them. It's a use policy for the most part, and what they can and can't use, what things they need to be aware of. Are they allowed to use social media? Mm-hmm. Can they use their own devices, their own business devices for these types of things? Another really important one is the disaster recovery plan, and not only a plan, but when you've tested and know that it will work for you. And the plan is a little bit bigger. It's also technology and tools. So, do you have a disaster recovery plan in place and systems in place that allow you to get out of a situation like ransomware? Can you go back in time 3 or 4 or 5 days and recover someone's computer who may have been infected from ransomware kind of situation? And, kind of like insurance, we talk about these kind of technologies in use that go pretty far for an organization, and not just ransomware. This is important when somebody has water damage.
Mm-hmm.
Use the example of last winter, the building across the street didn't have a fire, but the pipes broke on the 6th floor.
Right.
And the water rained down over the weekend in that building.
Floor and the 4th floor.
Oh my gosh, it was terrible over there. So disaster recovery, cyber now falls into that disaster recovery world. Kind of mentioned early, beginning with keeping your devices updated. This includes, servers, laptops, desktop computers, your routers. All that technology needs to be updated and have the most recent, safe lists and things and information, virus protection installed on there. Password policy is an important one. You asked about policies. Mm-hmm. And that's an important one. And I cover that in a few blog posts, and I'll share that again probably in a follow-up email for those who are on the webinar. I have about 6 or 7 different password policies that I end up sharing with people, and mostly, you've heard it before, but encourage it, using complex passwords that, somebody wouldn't recognize, using characters and uppercase and lowercase letters, using site-specific passwords. So the password you use for Facebook should not be the same password that you use for your banking system. It seems obvious, but you'd be surprised that the most common password out there is actually password. The second most common password is 1 2 3 4 5 6. And it is, and people will share that password between the same sites. So it's so easy for people to get in. Encourage frequent password changes. You can even use password managers, which essentially secure databases allowing you to manage all those passwords. Auto-locking your devices are also really important. There's a few other things, but those are the most important ones out there for people to do. Another one out there, wire transfer policies, and we heard about those wire transfers as being a major target for cyber thieves. So having good policies in place with your bank, your employees, and your executives as to how and when wire transfers can happen and in what process is a good one to have as well. I mentioned securing your devices already as part of a process for good password protection. Mm-hmm. Talked about security steps with your bank. And you brought this one up, Matt. I appreciate this. One third-party IT partner of some type is good, just as good as having an insurance partner to really help evaluate, are you really in a good spot? Do you have all the right things you need? Have you done your due diligence as an organization to make sure you're taking every precaution you can? Do you understand that there are the social engineering compromises that happened, but have you done your job of making sure your firewalls are updated? Is it 5 years old and
Right.
you haven't done an update? Things like that. And finally, and again, so glad to have Matt here with us today. Is just that, having taking the right risk and right policies and evaluating those for yourself.
Yep.
Okay. Do want to offer one item for everybody here as well you can walk away with. And actually, from those of you who are in accounting firms, I've shared this with everybody in the past, and it came out last October. The IRS updated a what's called safeguarding client data. And it's not just safeguarding client data. It's really a really good document in here. And if you look in your handouts section on your control panel, you'll see it in there as a PDF you can download. I like this document a lot. It has lists, to-dos, all kind of different things that help you assess the impact, create and follow a plan, test, monitor, privacy notice. It's not just for accountants. It's not just for the IRS, people using the IRS services. It's for anybody who really has any kind of client data or employee data you're monitoring. Yep. It's good steps in here about following certain laws and regulations that you want to adhere to. Okay, let's have some questions as we're wrapping up. And I see that some have come in, and I will work on those. So the first question came in. This happened a little bit ago. Does ransomware attack affect local drives, or does it move through a network? And the answer to that is originally it was just localized to an individual computer. Over time, the hackers have modified the code to grow and expand. And some of it has to do with the way your network is architected. But what could end up happening is the computer that you're using or someone's using could get infected, but we haven't seen get infected onto then the servers as well as multiple devices. And that's kind of what happened in the MedStar situation is a device got infected, and somehow that malware, that code that was written there, was written in such a way that it would spread out through the network of the environment that they had, and that's why their compromise was so complete, and so many different sites were affected by the situation. So the answer is most likely yes anymore. Let's look for another question that we have. This one's for you, Matt. I guess, how often are your clients filing claims for breaches or cyber attacks?
More than they used to,
okay.
Unfortunately. There's not a lot of frequency that I see with this. I'd see maybe 1 or 2 reported claims, Dave, once a quarter, once every 6 months. Just like I don't really get that many claims for someone that's had their house burned down. It just, something with that severity doesn't really happen that often. But I would say, I get maybe 1 or 2 phone calls a quarter for someone saying, hey, we've been breached. We think it's pretty bad.
Right.
And we're not sure if we can
recover. How do we recover it?
How do we cover this? What do we have, and how can we get back up on our feet? So,
okay,
unfortunately, more claims activity than I would like to see.
I have another one here. Is the cloud safe? And I get that one a lot because and that's a good question to ask. Thank you. That one, in a lot of cases, the cloud is safer than most places out there in a lot of ways. There are bad places out there in the cloud, and basically the cloud is a service or an application or some way. But the reason people are using cloud services is because they can't take care of some of those services for themselves. So oftentimes we're going to recommend a cloud service solution for an organization because it's so costly, time-consuming, and technically beyond an organization's ability to manage some of those systems for themselves, that if we put it in the cloud, it's actually the better off there. There's more updates, better equipment, and more secure protection than if it was be done internally in their own facility. So is the cloud safe? I advocate, yes, it's safer than in most cases for most organizations and they're trying to do for themselves. And we're running out of time, so I'm going to run to our next slide, which is, Matt, I want to thank you for joining me today.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks, Dave.
Share with everyone a little bit about your organization, where they can find you.
Sure. You can hop online, www.mcfarlininsurance.com. Feel free to shoot me an email, matt@mcfarlininsurance.com, or give me a call. Happy to talk over with anyone out there listening. If you want someone to come in and help you assess your exposures to these types of losses, feel free to reach out.
Great. Again, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Our next webinar is about our cloud services, and we're providing that on June 21st. Again, another Lunch and Learn. I'll be sending out some emails with some invites for anyone who would like to join us about demystifying the cloud, trying to understand about how cloud services can help improve.
Is that an intentional cloud pun?
Yeah, actually it is.
With some risk? Nice.
It is. We threw it in there. It's, again, this is more of an educational program, as we kind of do every month in our webinars, trying to provide a better understanding about how cloud services can help reduce costs, help people work anywhere, anytime. Those kind of misconceptions about the cloud, like the question we had earlier, is it really a good solution for organizations? Again, if you're not familiar with my organization, East Technologies, we're here in Columbia, Maryland as well. We provide managed IT support, secure cloud offerings. If you are not working with us already, if you are questioning looking for better ways to have your organization supported with IT, or looking at cloud solutions, please feel free to contact us. My email is dave@easttech.com. I have a blog post I run out there and a newsletter. We have a survey coming out and looking for some of your feedback, and I have recorded the webinar, and we'll post that information as well. So just want to thank everyone for joining us, and look forward to catching you hopefully next month. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Dave.